Loren, and I'm a portfolio manager with HighView Financial Group. Today, I am joined by Fiona Wilson, a senior portfolio manager with Guardian Capital, and we are here to welcome you to International Women's Day and have a chat about the importance of women in finance, being in senior leadership roles, and having representation on corporate boards. Fiona is responsible for portfolio and risk management of various dividend strategies at Guardian, and in particular, our global equity dividend mandate. Fiona joined Guardian in 2011 and has over 25 years of global capital markets experience. International Women's Day marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. It is also a celebration of women's achievements and women's equality. In the world of finance, more women are advancing to senior leadership and C-suite roles, but we still have a long ways to go. A recent Deloitte study on leadership representation and gender equity in the financial services sector shows that women in leadership roles is at about 24%, so projected to grow to 28% by 2030. And academic research suggests that it takes a 30% threshold to meet the tipping point where a minority subset can actually enact change and make a difference within a broader group. So on that note, welcome everyone. And my first question to you, Fiona, is why finance? And what attracted you to this field as a career?
Well, thank you very much for having me on today. Loren, I'm very excited to be here, especially to celebrate International Women's Day. Interesting question about finance. I actually started out my education in psychology. I did a BA in psychology, and then I moved into finance. And what I decided was in the business world, I really liked the quick pace of what I was studying. I liked the answers to questions. There was kind of a right and wrong answer. I like the risk management, and something's always changing, especially in the equity world. I mean, every day is a different day, and we've seen that. And look at what happened with COVID, what we've seen the last couple of years in the markets. There's always something new and exciting. So you're always learning new things, and there's new opportunities. So that's what really attracted me to finance, and that's why I really enjoy a career in this area. And I think it's actually a great area for women, many women, to look at. And they should be looking at it for their careers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I completely agree with you. And I think, from the perspective of even if you did an undergraduate degree in something other than finance, but then maybe going into finance at a later date, it just opens so many doors to so many different types of roles, whether that's in capital markets itself, or whether that's in working in a company environment, or even starting your own business. I mean, I think finance can be critical to many careers, and I think it's a great space. The other thing I would say is that women bring certain things to the table, in particular, relationship building, right? Working relationships, collaboration, attention to detail. These are all great things that, in the world of finance and in almost in any other kind of a role is very important. And I think we should, think about those things when we're thinking about our careers.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned before, even if your background wasn't in business, but you find business really interesting and finance interesting, there's no time like the present to look at that. I actually basically, as I mentioned before, I was in psychology, and then I ended up doing a commerce degree, an MBA. And I worked for quite a few years. I loved my job. I was in the derivative space, and then I had children. So it's always a hard balance. And I always find that women always think, okay, well, I don't know if I can go into finance because it might be more of a stressful, challenging career, but you can, and you can do it. I actually took time off in between and stayed home with my kids for a while because I'm very type A. I'm very focused. I actually did my CFA at the same time. I was raising two children and working full time. And then I decided to take a bit of time off. And it was interesting because a lot of my counterparts kind of said, it's going to be very difficult to get back into the industry. If you've gone out, you can't get back in. But it wasn't, because when I was off, there's always courses you can take. You can continue your education. That's what's so good about finance. It's such a broad area. There's so many things to study. So I continued that, and I went right back into it once I decided to go back to work. So I think as a woman, if you worry about, raising children, how can I manage it all? It's definitely manageable. Loren has 3 children herself. So it's definitely manageable to be able to do both. And I think that should not preclude you from looking at the finance industry at all.
Well, and all great points, Fiona, and thank you for sharing that. In terms of, yourself and being involved in the asset management sector, I mean, it's a rarity. We're seeing more women go into the role of actual asset management, being a portfolio manager such as yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about, being involved at the asset management level and then the perspective you bring to your team that might be different from that of a lot of the guys on the team?
And I think that's true. I think we actually have quite a diverse team here. And we have 3 women and 3 men. And I do think that we bring a different piece to the team. We've got different experience, even raising children, because no matter what, you're usually kind of the one who is the one who's more hands-on. So it's a different risk reward experience. One of the studies I was reading from Mercer actually said that women take less risks and are less likely to jump into a bubble in the stock market. The adrenaline with the men kind of, they might see that more of an opportunity. So I think women are more a risk reward. My whole life has kind of been risk reward. I remember even raising my children, I would always say, what's your worst case scenario? And that's what I look at in the markets too. Like you look at your best case and your worst case scenario. So I bring a very strong risk reward perspective to our team and different life experiences I mentioned before, and also to relationship building, especially with clients. More and more women now are the sole, they're the ones in charge of their future, in charge of their, with divorce rates, with demographics, women tend to live longer. So it's, women like to relate to other women too. They get a different perspective. And it just makes more sense to be able to speak more to someone kind of in the same time frame, same headspace as you are. And for team building, women tend to have more stronger relationship skills. And so kind of more mentoring. I've definitely been a very big proponent of mentoring, and I've mentored on the CFA Society and on our team. I'm always trying to mentor, and I really think that's something that women make more of an effort to do. And the other thing too is if you look at like retention levels, if there's this increases the retention levels of teams and more satisfaction in teams. So it's a really good team building approach to have diversity and to have women also along with men on the team.
I would agree. And just speaking of mentoring, there are some great organizations in the world of finance, in particular for women. We have, 100 Women in Finance, which I've been a member of since the start. We have Women in Capital Markets that offer great mentoring programs. And we can also look to Barbara Stewart's annual Rich Thinking literature. For many years now, she's been doing an annual piece on just women in investing, and great reading of her Rich Thinking series. So just turning now away sort of from that and focusing really on corporate boards. A recent Catalyst 21 study suggests about 38% of the global MSCI corporations have 3 or more women on their board now, up from 36% in 2019. And according to Moody's Investor Services, North American companies, 29% of corporate board seats are now held by women, up from 24%. So we are moving in the right direction, but not quite at that 30% threshold yet, but we'll get there. But from an investment perspective, when you're looking at investing in companies and, looking at perhaps women representation on boards, what can women bring to the board environment, and particularly for all of us who are looking at investments and some of our women clients who say, are we investing in women-led companies? Just talk a little bit about that.
So I think it gives you a broader corporate responsibility because you're embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion elements into your corporate strategy. Policies, overall mission, you can prioritize DEI with your long-term strategic goals. So I think it's a really good way of embedding that from the very beginning. There's, as I mentioned before, a lot of different perspectives, backgrounds, and experience, and this is key for long-term goals, long-term goal building in companies, strategies. When I'm looking at companies to invest in, I like to see women representation on the board. And as Loren said, we're getting to the 30% mark. We're not there yet, but we're moving in the right direction. And obviously boards are looking a lot more at diversity, which I think is great for corporate strategy. And there's studies that have been done too, that when you look back and when you see more and more women on a corporate board, the companies are often a lot more successful. Because again, it's just the diversity aspects. It's different opinions. You don't get groupthink. You're not getting everyone with the exact same background, basically not looking at every situation the same way. And that's what you want when you're looking at investing in companies.
And I would also think for a lot of companies, particularly consumer products companies, women often make the purchasing choices in family, right? And so having the perspective of a woman on your board when it comes to particularly selling goods, I think can also bring great perspective. So
yeah, I think that's really important. because it just shows where the consumer, it's a representation of the consumer on board is perfect. And
Yeah.
it makes sense. It makes logical sense.
Yeah. And I think women too think more about social things, things that are impacting society. And it can really help make a difference in the way the board might think strategically as well. So all good things to think about. But
Yes.
as I said, we are moving in that right direction. And, looking forward to seeing more of that and celebrating more women's achievements as we go forward. Okay, well, thank you. I think that today's discussion has been just absolutely terrific, and I really appreciate you joining me to talk about the importance of women in both in roles in finance and at the corporate board level. And let's hope we see more senior women make it to the C-suite as well.
Thank you very much for having me on today, Loren. It's a very exciting time. And as I said before, I think we're seeing, as you mentioned too, more and more women are becoming more involved, higher levels, the C-suite level. And I think we have to keep moving forward in that direction.
Yeah. And happy International Women's Day to everybody who has an opportunity to watch us today. Thank you.
Happy International Women's Day.